because people have believe myths about them. Not all dinosaurs were huge. Not all dinosaurs had wings or could fly. Not all dragons, what we call dinosaurs, breathed fire. Some dinosaurs traveled in herds, others didn't. Some dinosaurs lived in caves, others lived in the forest or in seas. Dragons are said to have lived in those places. Many dinosaur eggs and nesting sites have been found, and they've been found all over the world. And dinosaurs, at least most of them, were said to lay eggs. Now, there's another very interesting thing, and it is this soft tissue, which is in bones. Within our bones are what they call soft tissue. Well, they for several decades, scientists have been finding soft tissue inside dinosaur bones. Okay. And these were bones that they believed to be, pick a number, 65 million, 120 million, 150, whatever number they want to come up with. But that's in direct opposition to known fact and to known scientific fact. And it's direct opposition to the basic tenets of evolution. These things were mostly ignored until it really apparently came up about a little bit more when the Jurassic Park movies came out and some of that stuff. This Dr. Mary Schweitzer, and she was working with Jack Horner. Jack Horner was kind of the consultant and the model for the lead character, as I understand it, in the Jurassic Park movies. So they found this very well-preserved Tyrannosaurus rex. But they found soft tissue in the bones, blood vessels that are still pliable, collagen, proteins, things like that within the bones. Now, there is no record of soft tissue, at least as far as I've been able to find, lasting in bone more than a couple thousand years. Okay, none. There's no example of that anywhere. And so this got the attention of some of the media several years ago. In fact, 60 Minutes did a report on it, but then they moved on to some things. But some scientists were intrigued by this. This evidence that there was soft tissue being found in several dinosaur bones that were supposedly, again, pick a number, 120 million, 500 million years old, whatever. So what are you going to conclude from that? The fact is there's no record of soft tissue lasting in bone more than several thousand years at the most. The premise is that these dinosaurs are tens or hundreds of millions of years old. So what are you going to do with that? Well, that got a lot of the scientists' attention, and so when they looked at this evidence that soft tissue was first found, they had a couple of choices. They could conclude that dinosaurs did not live hundreds of millions of years ago, or they could conclude that soft tissue and bones can last hundreds of millions of years. Now, as far as I can see, those are the only two choices. They found soft tissue in bones. You're going to have to conclude that either soft tissue in bones can last hundreds of millions of years, or the dinosaurs didn't live hundreds of millions of years ago, right? Well, guess which one they chose? Do I have to tell you? In contradiction to all scientific facts, suddenly they decided that soft tissue and bones can last hundreds of millions of years. They have done studies, numerous studies, and they've not been able to come up with any way that soft tissue and dinosaur bones can last more than several thousand years. But it doesn't matter. Actual true science doesn't matter when you approach it with a preconceived idea. They still accept that soft tissue lasts hundreds of millions of years. Now, look at this from the Smithsonian magazine about 15 years ago. This is from the Smithsonian magazine. I'm going to give you two examples of these geniuses concluding this stuff. This is from the Smithsonian magazine. Any textbook will tell you when an animal dies, soft tissues such as blood vessels, muscle, skin decay and disappear over time, while hard tissues like bone may gradually acquire minerals from the environment and become fossils. Mary Schweitzer, one of the first scientists to use the tools of modern cell biology to study dinosaurs, has upended the conventional wisdom by showing that some rock-hard fossils tens of millions of years old may have remnants of soft tissues hidden away in their interiors. You see, the premise is we can't sacrifice our premise that it's tens of millions and hundreds of millions of years old. And so this discovery may show that there may have remnants of soft tissue. Shazam, there's no evidence of it, but look at what we found. We found soft tissue, and that must mean that dinosaur bones are millions of years old because we know they lived millions of years ago. Now, this is what the website for the History Channel says today. I think I just got this a couple of weeks ago. Headline, scientists find soft tissue in 75-million-year-old dinosaur bones. And the sub thing was, in a pile of uncompromised dinosaur fossils dug up in Canada a century ago, British scientists find soft tissue materials preserved for some million years. So instead of paying attention to all the actual scientific studies that have been done, since their premise is that dinosaurs lived millions and millions of years ago, when they find soft tissue in the bones, they decide that they lived. So I'm going to move on. So what happened, there's all kinds of evidence, let me say this, that people and dinosaurs lived on this earth at the same time. There's zero evidence that dinosaurs lived millions of years ago. But that doesn't matter. They just keep, you look at the evidence. Look, 2 apples plus 2 apples equals 4. And they say, no, it equals 6 because I decided a long time ago that 2 plus 2 equals 6. Now, what happened to the dinosaurs then? If they're extinct, where did they go? Generally speaking, of course, most dinosaurs as we think of them are extinct. We actually still do have, of course, some dinosaurs. Crocodiles, alligators, Komodo dragons, those things are basically dinosaurs. But what happened to the dinosaurs? Well, nobody really knows, I don't think. For sure, scientists don't. They have suggested many theories, and this is just a small example of some of the theories that they've come up with. Dinosaurs starved to death. They died from overeating. They were poisoned. They died from disease. They became blind from cataracts and couldn't reproduce. Other mammals ate their eggs. Volcanic dust, poisonous gases, comets, sunspots, meteorites, mass suicide, diarrhea, constipation. Seriously, they've spent millions of your tax dollars trying to prove this stuff. Parasites, shrinking brain, slip disc, changes in the composition of the air. Kinds of theories. And it's obvious that nobody really knows for sure. Unless you believe the Bible, and then there's a pretty good theory about that. Alan Sherrig wrote in A New Look at the Dinosaurs, wrote this. He said, now comes the important question. What caused all these extinctions at one particular point in time, approximately 65 million years ago? We know that it happened 65 million years ago. Dozens of reasons have been suggested, some serious and sensible, others crazy, yet others merely a joke. Until the recent theories about extraterrestrial collisions, some ideas about the disappearance of dinosaurs centered around the mammals beating them in the struggle to survive. One theory suggests mammals killed dinosaurs because they ate dinosaur eggs. Other scientists suggested that dinosaurs caused their own extinction. According to this theory, too many meat-eating dinosaurs evolved, eating all the plant eaters, and caused all dinosaurs to die. Ideas have some pitfall, as many others. They explain dinosaur extinction, but ignore the extinction of other groups. And then he says, every year people come up with new theories in this thorny problem. The trouble is that if we are to find just one reason to account for them all, it would have to explain the death all at the same time of animals living on land and of animals living in the sea, but in both cases of only some of those animals. For many of the land dwellers and many of the sea dwellers went on living quite happily into the following period. Alas, no such explanation exists. And so he says, he's a scientist. He says, we just don't know. We really don't know. There's no way to know. We do know that they lived millions and millions of years ago, but we don't know how they went extinct. Well, the biggest problem, I think, is that most of their theories don't also explain how other animals, or why other animals didn't die out at the same time, by these theories. Now, there is one explanation, I think, that does does exist, and it's based on some evidence. If you give up the evolutionary prejudice and get rid of the assumption that it took millions of years, and if you take the Bible seriously, you can find an explanation, I think, that fits the facts fairly well. The Genesis record says, and that's the fifth day that God created all those things, the fish and all of that. That's what the Bible says on the fifth day. Then we come to the sixth day. God made the beasts of the earth and all those things. He created man in his own image. Man is to rule over subdue the earth, rule over the fish and the seas and the birds of the sky and all of that kind of stuff. And then God said, I've given you every plant-eating seed. And so that's where he tells Adam that they're to eat the plants. He saw that all was good. It was good the evening and the morning, the sixth day. So if you believe the Bible, then animals were created in the creation, and so were dinosaurs. So most of the dinosaurs were created on the sixth day of creation. Leviathan and some of the sea-dwelling animals probably on the fifth day. And so Noah took two, as we know. Well, he took 2 and 7, but 2 of every kind of animal onto the ark, not every species. And so just in simple numbers then, if there were 100 T-Rexes on the earth when the flood came, then 98 got killed and 2 went on the ark, right? Pretty simple. We do know for sure that the environment changed for a number of reasons. We know that the environment changed dramatically after the flood. The environment of the earth was not the same before the flood as it was after the flood. For one thing, we know that in Genesis 6, that was the first time it had ever rained. It never rained before that. And so when it rained, it did something to the atmosphere. Another indicator is that there are dinosaurs found all over the world. I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a few minutes. I can't prove it, but I believe that when the flood came, the landmass on this earth was all in one place. Again, I can't prove this, but and the Bible doesn't indicate anything about it. But it would make sense that if the entire earth was flooded, that some of those land masses broke up, and that's probably when the continents were created. So it only makes sense then that the dinosaur fossils came to be during a huge flood of some kind. They were created in the time of creation along the same time Adam and Eve were created. And I know that's not Adam and Eve. They're too fair-complected, but that's the only one I could find. The greatest evidence of fossils forming the flood is the fact that we have fossils of dinosaurs all over the world. Now, this is important. When an animal falls over dead, its body doesn't fossilize. It rots or it's eaten by other animals if it's just on the surface. I mean, we see this all the time, roadkill out here. Those animals, when they're sitting on the surface, they don't fossilize. The only way for a dinosaur to fossilize is if it is completely buried in mud. The minerals in the water would then slowly replace the soft flesh and the bones, turning the remains into a fossil. It would take a lot of mud to cover those huge dinosaurs, the big ones. Remember, some of those things are 50 feet high and 120 feet long. And so there's a number of factors related to that. And so I'm going to go on because it's related to, could dinosaurs fit on the ark? The answer is yes. First, we don't know exactly what Noah's Ark looked like, but we're pretty sure it was more rectangular, probably shaped like a barge of some kind, and at least in some ways. It was 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. Calculations have been done based on those numbers that all the kinds of animals living and extinct would be able to fit on the ark. Now you say, how? Well, there's a couple of other aspects of that I think are important to remember. But the common estimates are that all the kinds of animals on the earth would be able to fit in the ark with room to spare. Second, there were many small even what we consider to be dinosaurs. There were a lot of small ones. Not all that long ago, in 2000, New Scientist magazine announced the discovery of fossils. This is the smallest known adult dinosaur, Microraptors. It's 15 inches long, including the tail. And so people think, that all dinosaurs were huge. They weren't. Some were about this size. A lot of them were relatively small, the size of a chicken or maybe a dog or something like that. But Noah didn't need to put two animals that were 100 feet long on the ark. The small dinosaurs would fit on the ark easily. Now, there are only around 30 different kinds, not species, different kinds of dinosaurs. So that would be about 60 or so dinosaurs on the ark. Noah took them on the ark with him. They got off. All of them were not huge animals. In fact, it only makes sense. Noah probably took at least very young dinosaurs, or in many cases, probably even baby dinosaurs. Paleontologists have this is interesting too, they've cut dinosaur bones in half, and they've found that in some respects they're kind of like trees. You know, you can cut a tree and count the rings and what they've found is that dinosaurs have very slow growth rates. Even the big ones have very, very slow growth rates, especially when they're young. And so when they cut these bones, they discovered that. And so I think Noah brought very young and pretty small animals on the ark. It's logical to assume that the big dinosaurs that we know of were on the ark, and they were represented by younger dinosaurs, younger. Even the largest dinosaurs began very small. Of the dinosaur eggs that they found, almost none of them are bigger than a football. When a dinosaur is born, even the big ones, it's pretty small. Also, it would make sense to use the young dinosaurs, maybe even baby dinosaurs, because they're the healthiest. They're being the youngest. They are. Some of them may not even at that point been able to reproduce, and so they're generally speaking, younger. You younger people are faster than I am, and that's true with dinosaurs. And so the very young, ate less than the big adult dinosaurs. And so it only makes sense that Noah would have taken very young animals onto the ark. I think that probably applies to all the animals. I doubt Noah took a full-grown giraffe on the ark. He probably took a baby giraffe or two baby giraffes on the ark. In the late 1970s, skeletons and eggs of the Dinosaurus dinosaurs were found in southern Argentina. This skeleton that they found is so small that it fits in a person's hand, the skeleton of this one. And so I don't believe Noah took large adult animals on the ark. I think Noah took babies and very young animals on the ark. Reptiles have potential to grow as long as they live. From what I understand. And large dinosaurs were probably very, very old ones. And so the fossilized dinosaurs that we see today in the flood killed a lot of the dinosaurs, just like it killed a bunch of other animals that were on the earth. Evolutionists say, now here's another point where I think the view of the flood makes a lot of sense. Evolutionists say that the layers of strata show an evolutionary progress, okay, or progression. They say the simple things are at the bottom and the more complex things are at the top. And generally speaking, that's true. Here's another shot of it. So in other words, as they dig down in the earth, the trilobites are down, and then they find more fish, and then they find more amphibians and dinosaurs and mammals. They say that's because the trilobites started and then they evolved into other things and they evolved into other things and they evolved into other things. I don't believe that because I think evolution is untrue. And so I think there's a better description or explanation of that. This is another view of that with a little bit more information. And so if you look on the left there, from the bottom to the top is the bottom would be the deepest dig, okay? And then the next, and so it goes up toward the top. So that would be toward the top of the ground where that top one is, the quaternary, okay? Now, the lines represent what they find in all of those different strata of ground, okay? So they find the animals with shells and they find the little bitty, they find that in all of them. They find fish in all of them, in almost all of them. They find amphibians in a little bit less. They find reptiles in a little bit less. They find mammals, birds, and humans then. And so again, the evolution, this is because that's how they evolved. But there's evidence from the earth that says that doesn't make sense. And again, a flood does. And so when you look at that, this is sometimes the order, but it's interesting, it's not always the order. And so the idea would be that the animals that are at the bottom would be the ones that were buried in mudslides caused by a flood and those kinds of things, and then the amphibians and the reptiles. Why? Because as the flood was coming, fish, of course, were already in the water. And so amphibians could get out of the water. It was rising, but as long as they could get out of the water, they could get out of the water and not drowned. Reptiles would then be able to. But they couldn't get, generally speaking, couldn't get as to high a ground as other mammals. Okay, they wouldn't be able to climb to the top of mountains and those kinds of things. Birds, of course, as the flood built up, would be in trees, and then you would expect that humans would be some of the last varmints on the earth that would be killed in the flood. And so to me, that makes a little better sense as to why we have that. If you believe that there was a flood, a worldwide flood, then this makes a little bit more sense to me. Now there's some other evidence that I think even adds to that. Dinosaurs are found fossilized right next to a lot of other animals, which are still alive today. And so whatever killed the dinosaurs probably killed many of the other animals. There are, and this is one of the other things that I believe adds to this idea. There are what they call fossil graveyards. And these are really, as I understand it, almost all over the world. They call them fossil graveyards. They aren't evidence of dinosaurs just falling over dead, which is, I guess, what maybe some would presume or assume. Their limbs, their legs are torn off, and all kinds of things. These bones are from all kinds of different animals are just jumbled together. And it's all over, really all over the world that they see this kind of thing. Bones are just mixed up and all deposited together with other plants and trees and things like that. And so, to me, the very best explanation of that is for a worldwide flood. Because as the water came up and the animals and the people drowned, then it was swirling around, and eventually they all sank with the plants. And so then when the water receded, in a lot of areas, the water receded back from that. And so they would be there on the ground, although they would be below mud. They would be there at that level, and all these bones would be all mixed together. Now, there's a couple of other quick things about that, too. Many evolutionists, and they don't believe in the biblical flood, but many evolutionists even say the evidence points to a massive flood. Look at this quote from John Horner. There were 30 million fossil fragments in that. He was talking about one of these fossil graveyards. There were 30 million fossil fragments in that area. At a conservative estimate, we had discovered the tomb of 10,000 dinosaurs. There was a flood. Ordinary spring flood from one of the streams in the area, but a catastrophic inundation. That's our best explanation, he says. It seems to make the most sense, and on the basis of what we believe, that this was a living, breathing group of dinosaurs destroyed in one catastrophic moment. This is a quote from Paleo World, a special on the small dinosaur Coelophysis, I think is it. Torrential rains began to suddenly fall without warning. A flash flood tore through the stream bed, drowning everything in its wake. Swept along by the muddy waters, these things were doomed, he says. The sauropod dinosaurs drowned in a flood. A National Geographic special had a report on fossilized remains. The paleontologist Paul Sereno describes the site. Now, this is in Africa's desert, in the Sahara Desert. It appears that the animals were the victims of a huge flood. Extremely powerful currents piled their multi-ton bodies in a stack, and the river sediments buried their bones. So there's an example there, another of the National Geographic, and they don't claim to believe in God, saying that there was a flood. And so question, what kind of flood could happen in what is now the Sahara Desert that wiped out an entire herd of dinosaurs? Especially if they were some of the big ones. It would take a huge flood because, again, some of these animals, 50 feet high and that kind of thing. National Geographic, who continually pushes for evolution, didn't seem to have an answer for that. They just didn't offer an answer. Time and time again, evolutionists stumble on evidence of massive floods causing massive burials, but they either can't or won't let themselves see it. Africa and every other continent was once flooded. And that's a fact that many unbelievers just won't accept. Is there anything other than the flood described in Genesis 6 and 7 that would flood what is now a desert enough to drown all the animals as large as Behemoth? No. Nobody can come up with a better explanation than a worldwide flood. The scientists can't come up with a better, the evolutionists can't come up with a better explanation than that. And yet they don't really believe in the biblical flood. In 1878, 39 iguanodon skeletons were found in a coal mine in Belgium. These were killed in a flood, and with them were fish, crocodiles, turtles, and a bunch of other things that were buried with them. Now, does the Bible ever later refer to the flood destroying animals? I'm glad you asked. I think the Bible does say that, okay? A scripture we looked at before seems to say that. Asaph is writing this psalm, and he's speaking of God. He says, you divided the sea by your strength. You broke the heads of the sea monsters in the water. You crushed the heads of the Leviathan. I believe that is an inspired example of the psalmist saying, God, you destroyed Leviathan. You broke the heads. You crushed their head in the waters. I think that is an actual account, if you will, of the flood destroying animals. There's another one that we looked at before. In Psalm 104, there the ships move along, and Leviathan, which you formed to sport in. And so there the psalmist is talking about ships being on earth at the same time Leviathan was on the earth. Well, ships are built by people, right? Ships are built by people. They don't evolve from smaller ships. They're built by people. And so there's a psalmist saying that God was there. He formed Leviathan, and there were ships there at the time. We have bunches and bunches of examples of what we call dinosaurs that lived in the sea, in the ocean. We have their skeletons, their fossils, in deserts. Now, what else can explain that? What can explain that except a worldwide flood. And so that is, I think the only explanation, certainly the best. I think the only one. All right, we're out of time, and I didn't get done. Next week, what I'm going to do is I definitely will get done because I want to talk about what happened a little bit after the flood, and animals that became extinct, and just a couple of other things about dinosaurs and probably what happened after the flood because of the change in the environment and a variety of things related to that. So we'll do that next week. And then the last thing I'm going to do after covering all of this stuff, I'm going to try to quickly talk about, in spite of all the evidence, why do people